and I have a couple different ways, and I know I kind of explained it in the Wonderflex video, but I thought that I would just kind of show you as best I can how I do it. If I had other people with me, I could probably like actually physically do it on camera for you, but it's a little difficult just doing it by yourself and then having to worry about the camera. That's just too much work. So I have more examples that I can show you, and I can talk you through it, and hopefully it'll make a little more sense. So I'm actually working on a completely different armor set because it turns out that at Fanime this year, the big group that was doing Shunya Yamashita artwork is still going, and this is the third year in a row that I'm attempting to get a costume done for it, and I'm really hoping this time no horrible accidents happen or weird kind of crap like that to prevent it from happening. So I am doing this, which is super awesome, and kind of complicated, but I'm doing this mostly entirely in armor, except maybe this part. I haven't figured that out yet. Anyway, so I worked on this bracer, if you want to call them bracers, and this hair thing, hair clip, hair, whatever. So these are two completely different shapes, and I did them two completely different ways. So I'm going to kind of explain what I did and show you my patterns. So the first thing was, for the bracer, since it wraps around the arm, and it's kind of rounded, where Hawk, I think when I was working on that bracer, it's a lot more kind of squarey and pointy. So in that case, it didn't really matter so much if I like molded it around my arm because it wouldn't be the right shape. But in this case, it needs to be the exact shape of my arm. So I took some plastic wrap, just some plain old cheap plastic wrap. I think this is from Target or Walmart, I don't even know. And then I covered it with masking tape. I would recommend thicker masking tape. This is just all I had at home, and I really just wanted to work on it right now, so I'm going to have to go out and get better stuff. Anyway, so I wrapped my arm. Unfortunately, I wrapped my right arm, so I would suggest you wrap your non-dominant arm so you can draw your pattern on with your dominant hand. So I'm not smart, and I didn't do that, but I wrapped the plastic wrap in a couple of layers around until it was fully covering from my wrist to nearly my elbow, and then I taped around until there was no more plastic wrap visible. So you just kind of crisscross around and over it, and then if you have to cover up any pieces, just rip small pieces of tape off. So I ended up with this whole thing around my arm, which I've already cut the pattern out, but I just started with this. That's the side I drew on, so. And then I just drew the design on from freehand, just from looking at the pictures with a Sharpie. And then I kind of tried to gauge where the middle point was of this armor piece, since I couldn't really measure. If you have extra hands with you, I would suggest measuring and finding exactly where the middle point of your design's going to be, but I just had to kind of fudge it. So then I cut it out underneath my arm. Since the drawing part was up here, I cut along this inner part of my arm very, very carefully to cut it off entirely. And then I folded the design in half where I found the middle point, and then I cut through both layers, so that way when I finished I would get a symmetrical shape, which looks really odd. But from there, I put it on top of poster board, just the same old thin cardboardy poster board stuff that I've mentioned before, and I just traced it out the entire design. Then I cut out around it, not like on the lines, folded that piece in half in the middle point as well, and did the same thing, so that way my my better piece or whatever was also symmetrical. So I ended up with this like bear rug kind of shape, and these are little straps that I taped on, so never mind that, but this is what I get at the end. And the reason I do it out of this poster board stuff is so I can do things like this. I'm actually able to tape this around my arm to see what it's going to look like. Which is really hard to do right now. So I was able to do this. And for this piece, I couldn't really wrap my entire hand, so I just measured. I just literally went, oh, here's my wrist. Oh, it should go about that far out, which was, I think, 3 inches. And then I just drew that freehand off of the traced pattern on the poster board and then cut that whole thing out. So Then I had to do this piece, which is flat for the most part. I mean, it's going to have dimension, but it doesn't have to wrap around anything. And I actually just took this ruler and put it at the bottom part at my wrist, at the bend of my wrist. And then I just kind of played around with the angle, and I looked to see about how long I would want it to be sticking out. And it turns out it's about the length of this ruler. So I just drew a straight line on my poster board. And then I played with the angle a little bit and then drew an angle of the same length. And then that way I could kind of gauge if this is where my arm's going to be, this is where the design is going to be, and I could draw from there. So I just drew freehand this design based off of the couple lines I had, and then I cut it out. And then I taped it to the middle point of this piece with funky special taping to try and get it to sit up. And then that's where I wrapped the whole entire thing around. I taped some fake, I guess, straps around, and then I was able to gauge if that was the correct angle, if it was sticking out far enough or too far. And then if it is, I can always just shorten this part right here to fix that. I think I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. Now, there's also this hair piece that I was mentioning before, which is pretty much entirely flat. Now, when it comes to flat stuff, I pretty much just take rulers and measurements, and that's what I do. So in that case, I found something, which is this, that was about the size that I wanted the main portion of it to be. And then I traced this circle out and took my ruler again and went, okay, if that's going to be that big, then how far out do I want this to stick? Which is a little difficult to do, but I find that it's the easiest way for me to do it. So I always start smaller. So if I think, oh, 7 inches, that's what I want, I go with like 5.5 or 6, just because I tend to draw a little too big. You might not have that problem. You might have the opposite, but you'll find out. So I just traced out the circle, and then I drew my line, which you might be able to see. There's just a line, straight line going right through this. And that was how I was able to gauge the length of this piece here. So I drew all this with pencil. Actually, it's this way. I just drew with pencil and kind of sketched it out, and then covered it up with Sharpie so I could see the design better. Cut it out, and that's what I have, which I think is pretty good. And if it does turn out to be too big, I'll probably just scan this image and scale it down and then cut it out and redo the pattern. But in this case, since I want this to have some depth, what I'm going to do, I don't have any to show you, but you probably know what it looks like. I'm going to take tracing paper and trace the different parts of the designs so that I can do them in layers when I actually make it. Because I'm going to do probably maybe 3 layers of foam and warblood to give it the right dimension in certain parts. And so this bottom piece will be 1, then the middle parts will be 2, and then this really center part here will probably be a 3rd layer. But we'll see. So that's how I do my flat patterns and my not so flat patterns. I hope that helped. I know it'd probably be better if I actually was doing it and you could see, but my other camera is out of batteries and I just kind of wanted to get it done. So when I work on the leg and shoe armor, I will probably do a video more like that because that's super fun. And it's a little bit different. Anyway, I hope this was helpful to some people, and hopefully I'll be able to have more progress soon because I really need to get this done in a few months. So until next time, thanks for watching.